Hi, my name is Sophia, and today we're going to talk about topic 2.1 of the ACE International History textbook, Why Was There Dissatisfaction with Peace Settlements of 1919 to 1920. Start with key terms, pause if needed. Moving on. Now into the introduction to the chapter 2. The World War I led to collapses of major empires in Central and Eastern Europe. The Russia's Nicholas II and the Tsarist regime were overthrown in 1917 during the Revolution. In Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II was abdicated in 1980 after military defeat. These collapses created political instability, economic disruption, and power vacuums across Europe. The peace settlements were shaped by conflicting aims. Woodrow Wilson wanted a fair and lasting peace based on cooperation and self-determination. European leaders prioritized punishment and security. Therefore, the U.S. Senate refused to ratify the agreements, which pushed USA back into isolationism. Russia was excluded entirely due to its communist government increasing distrust. The League of Nations was created to prevent future wars, but it lacked full support and enforcement power. Now on to the events leading into the settlements. Vladimir Lenin signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in March 1918 in order to end the Soviet participation in World War I. Russia exited the war and lost vast territories, including key industrial regions and farmland. Germany gained resources and temporarily strengthened its position. However, Germany's defeat later in 1918 led to internal revolution and the establishment of Weimar Republic. Now, the Paris Peace Conference. Representatives from nearly 30 nations attended, but real power was concentrated in the, quote, Big Three, which were the Woodrow Wilson, David Lloyd George, and George Clemenceau. Victoria Orlando had limited influence despite being on the Council of Four, and each leader had different priorities. First, Clemenceau wanted to weaken Germany permanently. France had been invaded twice in recent history and wanted security through military and economic restrictions on Germany. Lloyd George wanted a balanced outcome. He aimed to maintain British trade with Germany while also satisfying public demand for punishment. Woodrow Wilson promoted his 14 points. These included self-determination, reduction of armaments, open diplomacy, and the creation of an international organization. His ideas were partially accepted, but often compromised. Now onto the 5 main treaties. The Treaty of Versailles, which was directed towards Germany, Treaty of Saint-Germain, which directed towards Austria, Treaty of Neuilly, which was directed towards Bulgaria, Treaty of Sèvres, which was directed towards Turkey, and the Treaty of Trianon, which was directed towards Hungary. Defeated nations were excluded from the conference and forced to accept terms without negotiation. This increased resentment even more. Now on to Germany under the Treaty of Versailles. Germany lost about 13% of its land and millions of people. Key areas included the Saar Basin under League control with coal given to France. Rhineland was demilitarized, leaving Germany vulnerable, as Rhineland is a territory which basically separated Germany and France. And the Polish corridor split Germany geographically, giving East Prussia to Poland. Germany also lost all of its overseas colonies, which became mandates later under the League. Military restrictions were also severe. Army was limited to 100,000 men, no tanks, submarines, or air force. Only 6 biologists were allowed, and Anschluss with Austria was banned. And on the right, you can see the key terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Now under the War Guilt Clause. The War Guilt Clause under the Article 231 placed full responsibility for the war, World War I, on Germany, and this justified reparations and caused deep national anger, meaning the resentment in Germany grew. Now on to other treaties. First, the Treaty of Saint-Germain. Austria lost its empire and became a small landlocked state. It lost its territory to Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Romania, Poland, and Italy. Second, the Treaty of Neuilly. Bulgaria lost land and faced strict military limits. It lost territories to Greece, Yugoslavia, and Romania, and their army was capped at 20,000 with reparations over $400 million. Third, the Treaty of Sèvres. Turkey lost large territories, including control of the Dardanelles. Turkey lost land to Greece and Italy, and Middle Eastern mandates were given to France and Britain. The Treaty of Sèvres was later overturned by nationalist forces led by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, showing that some settlements were not enforceable. And lastly, the Treaty of Trianon. Hungary lost over 2/3 of its land and population. Hungary lost its territory to Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia. Now on to reparations. Reparations were meant to compensate for war damage. France demanded high payments due to the destruction on its land. Britain supported reparations but wanted Germany economically stable for trade, as it had vested interest, and Wilson opposed any harsh payments. And in 1921, Germany was required to pay £6.6 billion. John Maynard Keynes argued that these payments would weaken Germany's economy and destabilize Europe, which turned out to be true. Now on to the reactions. France believed the treaty was still not harsh enough. Russia felt isolated and excluded. Italy felt betrayed because promised territories were not fully granted, and the USA rejected the treaty and League membership. Now on to the reactions of defeated nations. They felt humiliated, they lost territory and resources, and they faced economic crisis. And Germany showed these strongest oppositions because of the war guilt clause, the massive reparations, big territorial losses, and harsh military restrictions. Now onto the problems in successor states. And self-determination was difficult to apply, so around 30 million people around Europe ended up living outside their ethnic groups. First, in Yugoslavia, there were ethnic and religious divisions and political instability. In Poland, there were border conflicts and weak government. In Czechoslovakia, there were ethnic tensions, but it was relatively stable. In Austria, there was economic crisis, high inflations, and Anschluss was forbidden. And lastly, in Hungary, there was political instability, loss of territory, and an authoritarian rule. And all in all, the peace settlements failed to create long-term stability. They satisfied neither victors nor the defeated. They created economic problems, political instability, and resentment, which contributed to future conflicts. Now, this is the timeline, and that's it.